by Executive Order N-2920, issued on March 18th, 2020, NMUSD board meetings will be closed to the public. For Spanish interpretation will be available on the Zoom link. We'll have opening ceremonies, a moment of reflection, and pledge to the flag. Trustee Wigan, would you like to lead us in the pledge? Please rise.
Bob.
Oh.
Sorry, please rise.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Trustee Yelsey.
Here.
Trustee Barto.
Here.
Trustee Matoye.
Here.
Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Wigan.
Here.
Trustee Ursoilu.
Here.
Here.
Adoption of the agenda.
Trustee Crane.
Here.
Sorry.
Adoption of the agenda.
Move adoption.
Second.
Moved by Trustee Matoye, seconded by Trustee Crane. Roll call vote.
Trustee Yelsey.
Yes.
Trustee Barto.
Yes.
Trustee Matoye.
Yes.
Trustee Anderson.
Yes.
Trustee Crane.
Yes.
Trustee Wigan.
Yes.
Trustee Ursoilu.
Yes.
That'll be fun.
We're having some echo problems here. Community input on special agenda items only. Trustee Matoye.
This is an opportunity for the public to address the board regarding items on the special meeting agenda only. Each speaker has 3 minutes to address the board. Per board bylaws 9323, there is a maximum of 20 minutes of comments per topic. With board consent, the president may increase or decrease the time allowed for public comments, depending on the topic and the number of persons wishing to speak. In the event the number of submitted public comments for a closed session item are anticipated to exceed 20 minutes, the order of the comments will be read in random order until the 20 minutes have expired.
Thank you. We have 4 comments on item 7A. Trustee Anderson, would you like to begin?
Yes, this comment is from Michelle W. Please pull back on the secondary reopening and consider distance learning for all students district-wide. Numbers for COVID are continuing to rise. In distance learning, the COVID cases weren't all getting reported, so you don't have a clear picture of the situation. And the vaccine won't be available for at least a couple more weeks. We need to wait until then. Moreover, LA County resident teachers are under lockdown orders and are being asked to violate the quarantine orders to come to work in Orange County.
There is no reason students should not be in school full-time. Students are not participating in asynchronous work, and many parents are not holding their children accountable. It's time to get kids back to school in a regular full-day school setting.
Wendy Leese says, as an educator, former board member, and more importantly, resident of the West Side for almost 50 years, I have a passionate concern for the board to address learning loss. Trustee Anderson has asked the board to designate facilitators at each school. Now is the time, not next year. COVID has forced you, the elected board members, to take responsibility for each child who has fallen behind, regardless of which district you represent. Our Newport-Mesa community expects you to be fearless in your determination. My recommendation is for each school to form a team to include the facilitator, the office manager, the librarian, para-educators, tutors, special ed liaisons, even music teachers, to identify each and every child. A chart should be made for each child listing the resources to support the child. Mental health resources should be accessed as well. No stone should be left unturned. Meetings should be held to monitor each child. School personnel should reach out to the family and not wait for the family to contact the school. It will take effort, but in the long run, you will be giving these kids a future. Please don't tell us you don't have the money to hire extra staff. I know too well the Irvine Company endowment sits there waiting to be used for this purpose, for such a time as this.
Rich Lamas says, our family would like to send our sincere appreciation to the school board and especially Dr. Shaka and the entire Cloud Campus. Our son has been enrolled in the Cloud Campus since the start, and we couldn't be more pleased. Not only has he not experienced learning loss, he has been more engaged than ever before. We are so thrilled that the same could be said for our high school daughter, who has been in online cohort C due to health issues. She's a Newport Harbor scholar athlete who would love to be attending in-person instruction, but we are following the science. Most of her friends are also not returning at this time because of the COVID risk and logistical on-campus concerns. You should not be surprised that 150 elementary students have just opted to transfer to the Cloud Campus today, resulting in the hiring of 5 additional teachers. Obviously, many people still do not feel comfortable returning on campus, even at the elementary level. Learning loss does not have to happen if the student is vested in their own learning. Shouldn't we be more concerned with families who have been affected by the pandemic and have lost family members, employment, and might even be struggling with food insecurity? This is not the right time to push more in-person instruction at either the elementary or secondary campuses. Even Superintendent Russell Lee Sung is working remotely at home, as are many of the people who work in the administration building. In a perfect world, we would all love to be back on campus now, do the right thing, and stop pushing for more in-person instruction. This is not the right time.
Okay, thank you. And just on that last comment, just to clarify, Superintendent Lee Sung is not working from home. He is here now, and he is here every day, as is staff in the district office. So just a point of clarification. Today we're here for a board study session, and I think we're all somewhat conflicted about having to be here to do this, because on the one hand, none of us like the fact that we have to address this issue. But on the other hand, we're very pleased that staff has recommended that we talk about this and look at ways that we're going to help with this learning loss beginning within this year. And I think we need to move into it and continue on until we bring everybody up to speed, every student. So I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Lee Sung to take it from here.
All right, very good. Thank you, President Yelsey. And first of all, thank you for clarifying that comment. I have been working here in person in the office pretty much every day. And it's important for people to know that if there's any rumors out there that I've been working from home, that is absolutely not true. The other thing I wanted to address was another comment made by one of our public comments. And it has to do with LA County residents, teachers, or any staff member driving to Orange County and violating quarantine orders. And that is also not accurate. Individuals have the right to go to work, whatever county they are. And then just a reminder, we as education employees, we are essential workers. So there's nobody being asked to violate their quarantine orders in their particular counties. Okay, but now on to the study session. And I want to echo again what President Yelsey said, that certainly we are not happy to be in a situation where we're struggling with the pandemic, and especially as long as it has been going. But one thing that I am proud of is the fact that we have been facing the challenge in creating a quality instructional program under these circumstances, whether it's in distance learning or whether it's in hybrid or in person. And I really appreciate the work of our teachers, our support staff, our principals, our district support staff, who have been maintaining this quality instructional program under these very, very challenging circumstances. What I look forward to in this study session is hopefully we're not going to talk about vaccines. We're not going to talk about social distancing or the mask. We're going to talk about instruction. And that really is why we're all here, and it will always be why we're here, is to support our kids to be successful academically, socially, and as great citizens of our communities. So anyways, so I look forward to this time together. I appreciate the work that John Drake, our Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services, and his great team of presenters and Ed Division colleagues to put this information together. And this isn't just the only conversation we're going to have. This is the start of conversations that we need to have on student learning. This challenge is not a challenge that's going to be solved by a single program or by some supplemental support services or even a robust summer program. This is a challenge that we're going to be faced with for quite some time. But it starts here, starts now. But I want to go back, and I know Mr. Drake will cover this. It's what's been going on in the classrooms now, what's been going on. And we can't discount the great work that's going on under these difficult circumstances to use the time on the appropriate things. And so I'm hoping through our discussion that we'll set aside some myths, maybe some misconceptions, and more importantly, not only addressing what we're doing here in the short term, but what I'm so excited about, what I think we're all going to hear, is it goes beyond the short-term challenges. It goes on to what we should be doing. And so not just surviving this pandemic, but thriving through this pandemic when we get through this together. So with that, I want to thank John Drake, and we'll turn the microphone and the podium and the presentation over to him. Mr. Drake.
Thank you, Superintendent Lee Sung. I'm going to switch on over to some slides here. And before we get started, I do want to thank Rosie. We were having a few technical difficulties at the beginning, and she came and as a calming presence helped us figure out how we're going to be able to show video in this presentation. Okay, so moving our learning forward together is really the theme of this entire presentation. So President Yelsey, Superintendent Lee Sung, trustees, colleagues, guests, thank you for having us here this evening to share and discuss plans for moving learning forward here in Newport-Mesa. Knowing that learning and achievement are your top priority, and that the last 11 months in public education have quite possibly been the most difficult in the history, and I can say at least in my career's history, I do believe that there's opportunity in this, as Mr. Lee Sung talked about, to come out better for it. And I'm excited again to share and discuss our plans to support TK through 6th grade learning, not only in the immediate, but also as we move forward. So before we dive in too deep into the learning, I do think it's important for us to recognize where we have been and what has been done to get us to this point of having our students safely in school desks as much as possible and in front of teachers learning in the midst of this crisis. When I say students safely back in seats on campus, we've had to invent, revamp, design, and implement new systems, processes, and protocols for all aspects of our organization. This includes custodial services, designing, training, and using new protocols, practices, and equipment, ensuring processes are in place to ensure personal protective equipment is in the hands of all of our teachers and staff, supporting design and implementation of distance learning, and creating multiple new learning schedules that are in alignment with Department of Health guidance and new state regulations and requirements. The constantly changing circumstances, guidance, and dynamics have presented new challenges daily, and the efforts on behalf of the entire district, from my perspective, from teachers to support staff, to principals, to district personnel, has been nothing short of Herculean to get us to this point. But while this discussion is about moving forward and not dwelling on the past, it is important to highlight some of the work behind the 360-degree pivot that we had to make last March. The first order of business was pooling our district-wide Chromebooks and making sure they were put in the hands of all students as quickly and as safely as possible. As you see here, a masked and gloved Principal Flores from Davis, she's working her Chromebook pickup process. Likewise, new laptops have been purchased and provided to all teaching staff and many of our support staff, and hotspots have been provided to ensure Wi-Fi access. And our IT staff has done a major portion of this lifting. They spent countless hours supporting these efforts, and in approximate numbers, they've prepared and distributed about 1,400 laptops, 1,300 and counting, because requests continue to come in, hotspots, 4,500 new Chromebooks, and they continue to refurbish Chromebooks, and they're at about 35 refurbished Chromebooks as of today. Not to mention that they've set up all of our teacher classrooms, about 1,500 of them, with technology workstations. Training has also been incredible from the start. Hours of PD has been designed and provided not only for teachers and support staff, but as you see here, for students and families as well. You see an example here of one of our ed tech TOSAs providing a parent and student online orientation. And I will provide you after this kind of a calendar since the start of this of all the PD, the hundreds of hours of PD that have been provided to staff, parents, and families from the beginning. A heavy emphasis this summer on technology PD as well as PD for our teachers as we anticipated the start of the fall being in distance learning and knowing that we had to evolve into providing better services in that environment. From the beginning of the pandemic, Nutrition Services has continued to provide food to our students and families every day, whether students are learning on campus or at home, and these services still continue. Nutrition Services provided nearly 45,000 meals this summer alone, and thousands more since then to our families. Knowing the potential toll and anticipating the potential toll that this crisis could take on our students, staff, and families, our Student Services Division mobilized resources, training, and additional supports for our community while also quickly designing and activating a new Newport-Mesa support and care line to serve our students in need of help, both mental, social, emotional help, as well as any technological help or questions they might have during these times for the district. These are but a few of the many services and supports our district has made available to serve our community's mental health needs. And of course, there's the massive undertaking of distributing materials. Knowing students need tools to learn, materials distribution became a huge undertaking throughout the district, and is something that was again, nothing short of Herculean. From separating materials into individual student kits for use in person to distributing needed materials for distance learning to our families, our work to ensure all stakeholders was to ensure that all stakeholders had what they need at all times, whether at a distance or in person, in order to learn. And it continues to be part of our work today. And in preparation of the safe return of students to our schools, classrooms had to be redesigned to meet the safe social distancing requirements with reconfiguration of desks and additional safety equipment like the plastic partitions on every desk to keep our students safe while in our classrooms. And of course, as is the standard in Newport-Mesa, many teachers went above and beyond to incorporate these new requirements into themes that you see here that created a fun and positive atmosphere, warm atmosphere as kids return to classrooms. And then there's the Cloud Campus. In short order, a new school, the Cloud Campus, was created and opened to support students and families who wanted and needed to continue in a virtual learning environment this year. A design team under the guidance and support of Dr. Mike Shaka and ET Director Dr. Jeneth Mishney developed the structures, supports, and curriculum almost overnight that would guide teachers and students learning at the Cloud Campus. And currently, our newest school, the Cloud Campus, is the largest elementary school in our district with about 1,200 TK through 6th grade students. And then finally, and we'll talk more about this throughout the presentation, but additional instructional support has been added at all our sites, with the most needy Title I schools receiving full-time reading support and additional hourly teacher support. And with the additional staff, principals have coordinated schedules in a variety of ways to ensure that student literacy learning is supported during the school day and while students are at home. The creativity of principals, use of teacher time is finding ways to support during the time students are in school, as you see in this picture. And they're also figuring out ways to extend the day for students by scheduling virtual time with hourly teachers and small groups of students during their at-home learning for acquisition of the critical foundational reading skills. All of this and much more has been done and continues to be refined in service of moving learning forward through these challenging times in a safe and productive way. So I'll give you a few minutes, or not a few minutes, maybe a few seconds to read this quotation as we jump into some data, because this really does, I think, guide a lot of our conversation around making sure kids continue to learn at high levels. So before we jump into literacy data for our kindergarten through sixth grade schools, I think it's important to put the ideas surrounding learning loss in context. In order to lose something, excuse me, in order to lose something, one has to acquire it. And in this case, what we have lost is time. And while this certainly has impact, it isn't our students' fault. And I don't think it's socio-emotionally healthy to position our students as needing to be fixed because they lost something that was not in their control. So instead of focusing on loss, we need to focus on the time we have with our students. Connect with them as people and make sure that time we have together is spent on teaching, learning, and understanding critical grade level content that will impact our students now and in future grade levels. With our students in seats, and as the quote from the Council of Great City Schools says on this slide, formative assessments in the daily act of teaching is what allows teachers to respond to student need in the classroom on the spot when learning is happening. And these formative moments happen in various ways when students and teachers interact during instruction. We will get into these ideas around knowing and learning and thinking, knowing the learning and thinking of students a little later in our conversation. And a jumping off point for us today is to look at some of the broad brush stroke data we have from students around literacy. For kindergarten through second grade students, we'll look at our beginning of the year Acadience data. This assessment, this Acadience assessment is given 3 times per year, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And it gives us an indication if students are on track with foundational reading skills. We will look at the beginning year Acadience results, which really is the current data that we have. Mid-year assessments are starting next week. And much like doctors weighing and measuring kids during regular checkups, Acadience gives us a ballpark idea if students are about where they should be in knowing and applying their foundational reading skills. And then for 3rd through 6th grade, where students transition from learning to read to reading to learn, we will look at STAR reading scores from the middle of the year. We do have those. Those are hot off the press. And these scores measure reading comprehension and indicate instructional reading levels for students. So kindergarten, you see on the screen here, from 2019-20. So from last year. Jumping into the last 2 years of beginning Acadience data for kinder students, understand that this is a baseline. This is the beginning for our students. And obviously these measures the foundational reading skills at the beginning of the school year. This is usually given within the first couple weeks of school for our kinder kids. And as a result, it makes sense that this beginning data remains pretty constant and consistent for us and has for several years. As you see here, for foundational reading skills, last year at this same beginning assessment, students scored about 68% of our students were in the range of being on grade level.
Excuse me, Mr. Drake, could you share the screen because people watching can't, it's very small. Is there a way that you can share well?
So Rosie, is that you?
We're looking at the biggest picture we can. Maybe each individual viewer can adjust their own Zoom settings.
It's showing up as a small box as if it's a panelist. Is there a way to share the screen so it's the full screen?
They just need to switch to speaker view rather than gallery view, and it's whole screen.
For those that, did everyone hear that?
Yes, so each individual user needs to change their view in Zoom to adjust the picture that they're looking at. Okay, I think we got it.
Okay, thank
Are
you.
we okay?
Sorry.
No, no problem. Anytime. Stop me anytime. So again, we'll just quickly go over this 1920 data from kindergarten. The top score really is the composite score of all the subtests that are given for the Acadians. And that indicates generally that 68% of our kinder students were at or above benchmark, and that you see about a little over 31% of our students were below or well below in 1920. And ironically, we're actually a little bit higher this year. But again, this is the baseline for our kinder students.
District-wide.
District-wide, where the composite score is about 71% of our students as opposed to 68 the previous year. At this time, we're at or above grade level. Makes sense. Oftentimes it measures or shows us what they're coming into kindergarten with. When we go to first grade, we start seeing some impact. And the impact's pretty consistent at about 10%. So when we compare last year, the composite score at the top, the subtests of the Acadians assessment below, first graders in 1920, about 62% of them during this beginning assessment were at or above benchmark. And then this year we've dropped about 10% to about 52% of our students demonstrating at or above benchmark. And again, probably makes a little bit sense with the time that we lost and the adjustments we had to make between March and the end of the school last year for our kindergarten students. Second grade, another kind of anomaly. So last year, beginning assessments, about 77% of our kids were demonstrating at or above benchmark. And actually this year, 77% as well. This quite well could be, one of our assumptions could be that, these second graders did have a good solid year and a half of, the instruction around these foundational reading skills. And so had a better foundation to build on. And a reflection of the work of both students in their core curricular as well as some of the additional support through SIPs and so forth that they're receiving. And third, fourth, fifth, and sixth is when, as I said, students transition into that place of learning from their reading, not just learning to read. And so this is when they start taking the STAR assessment, which evaluates or assesses some of their comprehension skills kind of on a big scale. And what we find third through sixth grade is we have anywhere from 8 to 12% fewer students demonstrating grade level reading comprehension between last year and this year. So if you see here in third grade, we had about 66% of our students last year, mid-year STAR assessment demonstrating grade level. Basically, if they were at grade level, and then this year at the same time, we have about 56% of our third graders. Fourth grade, there's a difference of about 12%, 58% last year of our last year fourth graders were demonstrating being at grade level, and this year it's about 46%. Fifth grade, 52 to 42, so there's that 10% again, and then 58 to 50 between years for sixth grade students. So anyway, we slice this data, in this broad brush way. It doesn't get down. It's not diagnostic. These are indicators. We have our work cut out for us, without a doubt. When it points to the fact that students are and have been coming to us every year at different starting points. So this is not new for us. Maybe the amount is, but every year, kids come to our classrooms at different starting points. And our job is to know in detail each student's starting point from an asset-based lens and move their learning forward within grade level content based on what they know and understand. And I'd stop there for questions about data. And I can't see hands.
I had some questions. So when did we get I know we just got the STAR reading. What date does the Acadians?
Yeah, the
reflect?
Acadians, the beginning dates are about the mid-September. The time frame is mid-September to about mid-October. Okay. Is when that assessment's
so
given.
before we were back in person.
Yeah, it all seems a long time ago to me.
Yeah,
I believe it is before we were back.
Or right,
person.
we had just gone back, right? Because it was September 29th that we went back. Okay. And what did so staff, when they saw this, did they come up with the plan? Was it as they expected? What was the kind of reaction?
Yeah, I think several of our principals, as I kind of mentioned, coordinated their additional hourly support, either to push into classrooms or work with kids, to make sure that these pieces were solidly in place. I know some are currently, I'm going to say extending days for kids a little bit between that AM and PM with their hourly support. Some kids are staying within their cohorts to get a little extra support around these foundational reading skills. And then there's also the utilization of our SIPS program that many of these kids are getting.
And then one thing I've seen at a couple of schools is they have the LLI. I know we brought that in a couple of schools when we were back in normal times. Is that something that adapts well to virtual, or could it adapt, or have we thought about that? Because I know that what I'm seeing is the first kinder, first and second, they're still kind of learning. They're still early enough where the context is not as important. So those foundational reading skills seem like they're getting taught, which is awesome, except for we have some work on SIPs and phonics and those sorts of things. But what my concern is as we get into the 4th through 6th, you start seeing those issues that are addressed kind of with LLI, where they deal with books that are at a higher level or for more appealing to an older child, but like those who may still read at a level below their grade level.
Would you explain LLI to
it's level literacy intervention, and the way it works is it's 8 to 10 to 12 weeks, depending on how the site implements it, and they learn from books that are perhaps more interesting for a 12-year-old, but are written at a level that would be appropriate for the first, second, third reading level, for those building those foundational skills with content that is more interesting than a farm and a hen and a chicken. But then students can graduate from that after they move past. And the idea is that they don't stay in that forever. It's 8 weeks and then they move back to their classroom. I wonder if that's something we could think of for that kind of after hours, if that would help.
Yeah, so I'll have to look into that and talk with staff about that. I know, a good portion of our focus just in relation to getting kids into complex text is building that knowledge, that background knowledge, and giving them experiences that they can then connect to the reading to build that comprehension. How LLI plays into that, honestly, I'll have to look into that. And as far as it being used as a virtual piece, I'll have to look into that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Crane.
Thank you. 2 questions. One is, is there going to be a scheduled follow-up to those reading scores?
Yeah, so the second round of the mid-year Acadian scores are really kind of going on right now. And so we'll have that data, I'm thinking, in the next couple of weeks.
And then the second question is, do you also have math data?
The math data we have is, you'll hear from some of our teachers really within the classrooms. If we look at the Great City Schools guidance, with the limited amount of time that we had with students, we wanted to make sure that we were teaching and learning at that time and not using a lot of that time up with assessments, but really getting into making sure that we're meeting kids or giving them the opportunity to meet the expectations of the standards. So a lot of the data or understanding of where kids are mathematically is going to be in our classrooms, in our teachers' hands.
Thank you.
Mr. Drake, just for clarification, when you say some of the principals are extending their day to help some of the kids, that's virtually right now? It's all virtual, or are they?
Yes and no. So it's both. So there are many of our hourly supports who are virtually while kids are at home during their off time, whether AM or PM, are meeting with them in small groups to facilitate some of this foundational reading skills learning and things like that. I know there are also some principals looking at, using hourly support schedules during that in-between time between AM, PM. So if an AM student is out, they may have 20 minutes of time before that student goes home with a group of kids that they're meeting and working with them then.
Okay, because I know some people are looking, or we are looking into extending the day in elementary at some point. And so not in this discussion, but hopefully that can be part of it, because assuming.
Yeah, one of the things that we've just got to consider, right, is maintaining the cohorts. So in doing it in these ways, it does maintain cohort.
Okay.
Trustee Ursulou had a question.
Trustee
Ursulou.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for the presentation. I had a question on the 6th grade IRL slide, how 2018, was it lower performing than 2019 and the more recent years?
The slide says, and I would, the detail of that would be with George Knight's. So yes, that is what it indicates. Their mid-year IRL was, we only had about 44% of our kids at grade level in 18-19.
Is that kind of variant? What is the typical variance year to year? Because I'm trying to figure out how behind or not they are from the other slides. If that one was so low in 2018, is it a typical 10-point range?
Not sure I'm understanding your question, Trustee.
I'm just trying to figure out if what was staff's explanation for why do they feel that 2018 was so low for 6th grade? And if it's not low, is that just typical variance? Can we expect it to be these 10-point differences year to year, or 20-point difference? What is that variance year to year typically? Because then that means that I'm not clear how much lower they are doing this year versus the last year.
And I'm going to have to, again, get back to you on that. I don't know what the analysis is from year to year, or if there is this 10-point variance, or if it's more.
George Knight's is on the Zoom. Could he address that possibly?
Sure.
And I thought I remembered from back when we did the Wonders adoption that, and I don't remember if this is exactly correlated, but I remember we did the Wonders adoption with 6th grade and we saw the biggest hit that first year with that group. So I don't know if that's the correlation, but I do know that the 6th grade really did poorly that first year of Wonders.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Is George available?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, George is at the ready.
There he is.
Looks like he's at the ready.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I don't have hard numbers for you to say what the variance would be from one year to the next and a plus or minus type of a thing, but the STAR IRL, STAR Reading Assessment, is a universal screener, and we are looking at different kids. So you will see some jumps, but oftentimes it's very typical of a jump within a grade level. So you don't see it any bigger than that. I mean, but I think that on the most part, you will see a little bit of a jump here and there because you have different students. There's even enrollment factors can hit, and we do have those going on right now. So we're dropping in enrollment numbers, and it would absorb those types of hits. Maybe not 10%, might be 8 or 7% when we have larger numbers. So I'd have to look into it, but we can get back to you.
Oh, thank you. That makes sense. And I think Trustee Bartow's point made sense as well. If that was a year of a new adoption, that makes sense. Thank you.
True too. You're welcome.
If I may, I want to make a comment, just in terms of context. So it was a great question earlier on when we started this a bit of the discussion, is at what point were these assessments done? And I just want to make sure that we don't jump to conclusions with just this data. This is broad, very broad. This was baseline that was shared and the very first assessment. And I think it was Trustee Bardo, you know, it's like we were started in distance learning, you know, and we were in distance learning until the end of September, which is at what point elementary came back, and secondary, as you know, that's a different conversation. That was early November. So we have to put this in context. We need to take a look at it, the next assessment and the following assessment. And then to Trustee Ursulu's question is, you know, how is this norm? Is this fall into typical patterns or not? So that definitely is a much deeper dive into the data. And I love the fact that several of our trustees are already thinking in terms of data and asking really good questions. I know that Mr. Drake, this is not the end of his presentation. He's got much more. And then we'll get into some of the ideas and solutions and direction that we're going to go to support kids throughout the rest of this year and into the summer and beyond. Okay, so just want to put that in context. He's just warming up. He's just warming up.
But Trustee Anderson has been waiting for.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out one thing that I observed down there that I think is really positive, that the 2021 kinder cohort started out at a much higher level. So, you know, I don't think that that happens out of nowhere. So I think that it's really important to also highlight the work of the preschools that are really doing a lot for kindergarten readiness. And so I just wanted to call that out as something. Thank you, Kathleen and Michelle O'Neill, for all of their work around that, because I think that we're seeing those numbers and that's really important. And I think that helps us a lot with their trajectory going forward, particularly for that cohort. And then I just wanted to ask two questions about, could you talk more about the extending the day for intervention? That's the first that I've heard of that. So I'd love to know how many schools are doing that. Is that, how do parents ask for that? Is that happening at 1 or 2 schools? And then I wanted to just ask a couple more questions now, or we may talk about it later, but a bit more about a formalized, the math assessment across the district. For this year, it sounded like some of that was happening in the classroom. And so I don't know if George has more information on that, but I would love to hear at some point what that looks like for this year, since it's different. Thanks.
Okay, so the first thing, thank you for that that piece about the kindergarten growth, or where they're coming in at. And I agree with you 100%. Kathleen Leary and her team have done a tremendous job of bringing our preschools along so that kids are jumping in ready to kindergarten. And ironically, I had met with Kathleen quite a bit about this data this morning. And of course, in her humility, that never really came up. So I appreciate you recognizing that, Trustee Anderson. The other question was around the extended day, or extending the time. What a lot of our, I'll have to get numbers for you. I don't have numbers. I've had a few conversations with principals who have figured out ways to utilize their hourly support to provide the additional support for students while they're at home via Zoom and so forth. So that's, when I say extending the day, that's a majority of what I'm talking about, is them providing additional assistance while students are at home, making that adult connection, all of those things, and pushing some learning forward there. There are some conversations about, like I said, utilizing that time at dismissal between cohorts and after the PM day to, a chunk of time, whether that's a half an hour or 20 minutes, with some identified students who need some additional support. I know that there are some principals, I don't know how many, I don't know exactly which schools, but that are considering doing some of those things. And then the math assessment, the revised math assessment is in our fellows' hands. right now. So we've got about 60, 65 teachers utilizing those. You know, as you saw, those of you who were able to attend the webinar last week, what we want to make sure is that those are being used to identify what kids know to build on them, and not used in a way to necessarily determine a grade. You know, what research talks about is when oftentimes when we're given new tools, we use them in ways that are familiar with us. And some of the ways we're looking at using assessment are somewhat new. So we've got them in the hands of those self-selecting teachers who early on jumped into the professional learning that has moved their ideas and our ideas of responsive teaching forward. That's where we're at with the math assessments. So this, moving the conversation forward and our learning forward, this quote's been up there for a few minutes, and I'm hoping that some of you had a chance to read it. And I'm just curious, maybe from one or two of you, what resonates with you or what this brings to your mind when you read this.
For me, it shows that confidence in learning is a big, important step, where if you do, you know, if you kind of talk about people being deficient, they will feel as though they're deficient. So really building on what they know and building on your strengths are probably more important than trying to build up something that's not as strong. Yeah,
I just got some chills, Trustee Wagon, I'll be honest with you, because you're exactly right. You know, there is that idea of how we position kids and make them part of a learning community and as a contributor, not as somebody who is deficient. And honestly, I probably have jumped into mathematics and learning elementary mathematics and the teaching of it in big ways, because that's when I was labeled as not being very good at math myself. And here I am, an older man who still remembers that day. So I think that's a critical piece, definitely.
The disruption resonated to me because we're all, as parents, I think we're all still very much in this, you know, in a lot of ways, and it's hard to see that it is a disruption and it's not, you know, I think we're stuck in the day-to-day, teachers and parents both. I was at the pediatrician with my 10-year-old and just for a well check, and they asked, you know, how is your child doing mentally? Do they feel about going outside? Are they okay leaving the house to walk around the neighborhood? And I guess the pediatrician has seen lots of kids who feel very uncomfortable leaving their house for any reason. And it's obviously not a question that they normally ask in a well check. So I think recognizing the emotional and mental impacts of the disruption, and then how it's so much more important to be positive because people are in a vulnerable and anxious space, I think is really huge.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, anything we can do to create that safe environment for kids, both you know, socially, emotionally, and academically, is going to serve us and serve kids to move things forward. Thank you for sharing.
I think for me, the thing that
Trustee Anderson has.
My raised hand is not working. Unfortunately, it's bad timing. But the thing that stands out to me is the affirmative act of learning new content. And I think that that's really powerful because it's not that everything is a repeat or it's coming from, you know, what has been the learning loss, what are the interventions that are needed, but it's really using what has already been in place and to build on that and to like keep student engagement, particularly in this time, I think is key. So that's what stands out for me.
Trustee Anderson, you also hit on a good point there, that new content needs to be at grade level. If we're spending our minimal amount of time concentrating on previous grade level learning as opposed to, you know, that just in, or, you know, that working in those concepts into grade level content and giving kids access to that, then we're just going to continue to increase the gap. So that's a really important piece as well. And so we're going to move forward. So we do have a lot to cover. We're going to be here a long time. If we can. It would be an understatement to say that this pandemic has been challenging, I think, for all of us. But it has caused us to reflect. And I do think that there's a silver lining and some opportunity from this difficult time. And a guiding belief of ours in our mission is that we provide a high quality educational program for all. And I think the purpose of that mission, when we're talking about all, we're talking about all students, But I also think we need to step back and take a little bit of a longer view than that. And really make sure that we're meeting the needs of all students, while at the same time ensuring all teachers and administrators have the knowledge, skills, and tools to meet those learning needs of our students. And this is really what has to be the foundation of our work moving forward, becoming a learning organization that's learning together in service of our kids. And I'm going to go through this quickly. You've all seen this before, but this really is kind of a graphic that talks about the trajectory of teacher learning. We are apprenticed into teaching as students from kindergarten through college, and then we make that decision at some point to get into a credential program because we want to be teachers. And then we get a job. And the whole responsibility for learning for teachers really becomes the responsibility of a school district for the next 30 to 35 years. And that's a really, really important responsibility that we have and need to take very seriously. So stepping back and thinking about that responsibility, this visual obviously clearly delineates that the district's responsible for shaping the role of teaching and learning for and with teachers, and how a teacher sees and enacts their role from the first day to their last day as a result of the professional learning experiences they engage in the district throughout their careers. And if we're going to make sure that all students have access to and learn the most important grade level content, we must support the learning of our teachers around this critical content and the most frequent access that we have to support the learning of all our teachers is at their sites, within their work, through their site instructional leaders. You've all seen this before. So as we focus our learning, we need to create a learning system, a system where teachers learn in cohorts over multiple years with the support of learning communities. And in addition, we need to work on all of the elements within this pyramid simultaneously in every professional learning opportunity offered if we're going to transform instruction in our district to meet the intent of our standards. So you recognize the document here on the right. About half of trustees here were able to spend some time with us during the summer reading through some of this, and then the other trustees got it this weekend. Hopefully you had a few minutes to peruse through that. But it is a document that we refer back to because it's these 6 principles that will inform our work in supporting kids with their unfinished learning. And you might notice these principles guide us to focus on assets, as Trustee Wygand talked about a little bit earlier, depth of critical grade level content, and knowing each learner and their understandings of grade level content. The context from which we need to bring these principles to reality for our teachers and students lie in the principles and practices, have you heard me say it over and over, responsive teaching. And all the principles of responsive teaching definitely are nuanced and complex. And for our conversation today, it is important for us to unpack what it takes to know our students and engage them in rigorous grade level content. And rather than focus on learning loss, deficits, and remediation, we need to provide all students with access to their current grade level content. Students have always had different starting points, and this year is no different. Next year will be no different. What might be different is the exact starting point. And knowing our students is critical today. And today we'll see what that looks like. We want to approach this doing all we can so that students don't leave this year labeled as deficient.
Right.
With unfinished learning from their critical grade level content. And right now we have 2.5 hours with students each day. And our goal is to ensure that they leave after those 2.5 hours having experienced and accessing the critical grade level content that's going to give them access and success in future grades. So I'm going to ask you, from what you know about content and standards and practice, what does it mean, look like, and sound like to engage students in rigorous content? I'm wondering what your thoughts are. What does it mean, look like, and sound like to engage students in rigorous content?
think there would be a lot of discussion. I think engaging them in rigorous content would have to involve a lot of discussion on what the kids know, and then going maybe deeper on what they know.
Okay. So
less emphasis on the rote memorization that so many of us grew up with, because those types of facts are available at a child's fingertips, literally with their phones in their hands. They can look up content, but what they have to learn and what we're helping them learn is how to work with that content, how that content relates to their life, why it's relevant for them, and to be able to think critically as to where the content came from and how relevant is this, how knowledgeable is the author. We're teaching them to think and to think for themselves and then to use the content. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think a lot of that is being able to explain the content to someone else, sort of how we see in those math tutorials that we've watched, where the student understands the concept well enough to explain it to their friend or explain it to their teacher, and why they thought that way.
Or their parents, yeah.
You all hit on some really critical pieces and really their expectations of our standards. One of the expectations is being able to explain your reasoning. That is an expectation. Shar, you talk about learning to learn and putting, the idea of learning and understanding at the forefront. And we know, Trustee Wygand, that we all learn when we talk about learning theory socially, by interacting with each other and learning from and with each other. And those are the experiences we want to kind of start thinking about creating in our classrooms. So it does mean to engage students in their grade level standards as they are intended. And this includes both the content standards and standards for math practice that you see in kind of the lower right-hand corner. Those are the practices that we want to start seeing kids performing in classrooms. And while this example is in the context of math that I'm going to share with you, or the example that we've oftentimes talked about, ELA standards are set up in the same way, and they have similar competencies as these practices. So what I want to do is take a few minutes and start creating that vision for us and drop into a fourth grade classroom where a teacher has asked students to reason through together whether the equation 80 divided by 4, this is a fourth grade classroom, whether 80 divided by 4 equals 80 divided by 2 plus 80 divided by 2. And the question is a true-false question, and they've got to give reason for it. You'll see students making sense of the problem and persevering in solving them, as our mathematical practice talks about, constructing arguments, critiquing reasoning of others, and making use of structure, bringing the content standards and standards for mathematical practice into the learning. These standards engage students in finding whole number quotients, using strategies based on place value, properties of operations, and the relationship of multiplication and division, all critical content in fourth grade. As you watch the clip, think about how the students are sharing their thinking and listening to each other to make sense of the problem and understand the mathematics. And keep in mind the standard they are working on, to kind of get back to Trustee Metoyer's comment earlier, the standard they're working on is a conceptual standard. It is not a procedural standard that just calls for calculation. This content needs to be actually understood, because this standard is a critical building block for algebra, which is later in high school. So we're talking fourth grade. If they leave fourth grade without this critical content, and we wonder why algebra is a gatekeeper in high school. So as you watch the clip, you'll see the kind of learning called for within the standards, and you'll see evidence of mathematical practice that are bolded on the slides. So this is where we're going to try this, Rosie. Switch on this.
Video's playing.
We don't have audio. No audio? Yeah.
No.
Did you put that box that says?
Share screen or the box.
So Jason, you look like you are not sure.
So it's play.
Was for a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Well, anyways,
We'll carry on. We'll carry on. I think you get the gist of it.
The kids are doing brilliantly, right?
It is, yes. And really what it is, it's about a 4-minute clip of a 15-minute lesson. And so it's around how do we make sure the limited time we have that we're spending with kids in class is spent on the critical content, and that we're producing kids who are meeting the expectations of standards. Pardon me?
And the answer?
And the answer is all of the things that we've kind of talked about.
No, is 80 divided by 4 equal to?
Well, no, right? Because 80 can only be divided once. And that's what the class decides at the end, or a few students in that on the right hand of the equation. The other part of the conversation is, it's very evident, and I'm going to have to go back. I think it's either kinder or first grade, where kids learn what the equal sign means, that it means the same as. And so they recognize 80 divided by 4 is 20, but 80 divided by 2 is 40. And when you add 80 divided by 2 twice, it's 80. So
back to 80,
it doesn't,
right?
yeah. So they reason through it, make sense of it, and you see kids interacting. And there are a couple kids who immediately say it's true, right? Because they're looking at that order of operations, and it's 4 on this side, and 2 plus 2 is 4, so it's going to work out. And as kids talk, as you talked about, Trustee Wygand, this kid finally at the end says, yeah, I think I need to revise my thinking. I see how it's false now. So it's all that.
Not that I'm wrong.
That community of learners.
I'm revising my thinking to be right.
Yeah.
See?
And it really wasn't about the answer, right? It was about the understanding.
I think the thing for me too, John, that I think is really important with the rigorous instruction too, is it brings in a lot of gate strategies. So in the past, at times gifted instruction was kept for a small cohort of kids. So for me, I really love the depth and complexity and all of the factors that come alongside gate instruction. I think it really brings equity and access to all of our students to be able to start working through all of those as a class. I think that's really huge and will have a really positive impact long-term.
Definitely. Yeah, it's just making sure that the expectations of our standards are the expectations for everybody in the classroom. And so kind of moving forward, what does this look like in Newport-Mesa right now? You'll see in these 4 slides. Teachers have figured out ways to get kids to interact, share their thinking, critique reasoning, make arguments around the content that's in front of them. And while talking interaction is important for academic learning, we can't overlook, and we've hit on this already, the importance of this for social emotional well-being. Everyday lived experiences in Newport-Mesa classrooms, including academic experiences, can and do positively or negatively contribute to students' social emotional well-being. So let's not position kids from their deficits. Instead, it's our job to position them all as competent so that they can recognize that they contribute to the classroom and the learners in the classrooms. So I don't know, Rosie, if we figured it out for this second group. And get the audio. So I'll have to send you these because they're really critical to our conversation. And so unfortunately, we're not going to be able to watch them. But
and Mr. Drake, these were in our classrooms, correct?
That first one, no. The one we just watched actually is a classroom up in Seattle.
Okay.
At Lake Ridge Elementary School. It was actually an elementary school that I visited about 2 years ago. And learned a lot of what we're talking about right now, at least saw it in action.
Okay.
And you know, the depth that these teachers know and the language that they have and the positioning of kids is incredible. And it is a Title I school. It's, you know, very similar to some of ours, actually even more so. And they're in the upper, you know, echelon of scores. It's just amazing what those kids are doing, and you'll see that in those videos. We'll send them to you. And what you were going to see on this video is really kind of getting at what it means to know students. And what we had is an example of 3 of our Newport-Mesa teachers. One of them is here, 2 of them from Ray, 1 from Adams, collaborating while being supported by a principal, an instructional leader, and a teacher educator who's got all of those pieces of that pyramid that you saw in order to push the learning of our teachers forward in service of the kids. And we were going to drop in to a collaborative process that we call the Looking at Student Work Protocol, where teachers get together and they decide on a common problem. In this case, it was an addition problem in first grade, since first grade addition is critical. Students at first grade have to add two numbers up to 100 using strategies based on place value and properties of operations. And just in case you're wondering, the standard algorithm that we were probably all taught on, you know, how to add, subtract, and you carry and borrow the one, all that, that doesn't even come into play until 4th grade. So we're really at these early levels getting at the understanding of the concepts and the numbers and the relationships of them. And these teachers are collaborating over the work product that they got back from their students, and they go through each piece of their students' work and talk about where the kids started and where they ended at the end of this problem. And it just shows the depth that they know their kids, both from where they were when they started the week, and then once they gave them this problem, what they're doing now. The next step of that whole process is for them to reflect and think about, okay, based off of the work that we just saw and the product that we got from our kids, what do we need to do next? And in this case, they all arrived at the place of they needed to give some problems that were going to force kids to cross over decades, from 29 to 30, from 39 to 40, from 49 to 50, something like that, and regrouping. Those were the 2 pieces that they were going to work on. So they intentionally thought about, okay, what numbers then
would work that
are we going to use that are going to give that? And they settled on the problem of 38 plus 25. And then the last part of this 30-minute protocol is the principal asking for reflection. What'd you learn today? What are you thinking? And it's just a great piece of the teachers recognizing, and you kind of hear the, oh my gosh, I can't believe where they were at the beginning of the week, and now what they're doing at the end of the week. And in such a short period of time, they make these huge strides, all grounded in intentional work, listening and knowing to where their students are, and designing learning experiences that are going to continue to nudge that learning forward around that critical grade level content of adding up to 100 in first grade. So it's a whole process that we can go through. So moving forward still, the NMUSD teachers you would have seen in that video, that you actually see in this room, have been working on the practices and principles of responsive teaching for a while. But this work has only been with self-selecting teachers. As you see on this slide, this is the work that they've been doing over the last 3 years. We know that this type of teaching and learning is happening in some of our classrooms. We need to make sure that this is the experience that all students are having to ensure that they are accessing critical grade level content and meeting the expectations of our grade level standards, because we know they can. So we need to advance responsive teaching and address the critical learning for all our students by being responsive within the professional learning experiences we all engage in together.
John, and none of this has slowed down because of the challenges that we've faced this last year.
I will say that our fellows are still going strongly, really collaborating and learning around the data that they're getting from the revised assessments and pushing that forward. We've got about 40 of those fellows participating in a book study around discussion, both in language arts and math. And so those are going strong. I think the teachers who have been participating are recognizing, and you're going to hear from some, what it's doing for them professionally, but more importantly, what it's doing for the kids. So it is.
John, are these fellows spread across the district at every school? Are there?
They're not necessarily at every school, and that's what this slide's going to get at.
Okay.
But the idea being that it's time for us to bring everybody into the fold. And the capacity that we have to do that is also bringing all of our administration into the fold and positioning them as the instructional leaders at their sites with support.
Would you mind defining CGI for the general public?
Yeah, CGI, interesting question. So CGI stands for Cognitive Guided Instruction. And really what Cognitive Guided Instruction is it's basically a 35-year evolving base of research on how kids learn mathematics, how they think and what those learning trajectories are, and that all kids are positioned as competent sense makers of mathematics. And if we give them the opportunity to make sense of mathematics and listen and understand what they know based off of all these learning trajectories and continue to provide them experiences that are going to advance that learning, they'll be successful in mathematics.
Thank you.
So it's not a program. It's not a book. It's really around teaching kids math.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
And so this graphic is...
Trustee Anderson had a question.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. How do we know if schools in our zone are currently participating or slated for next year or the 2-year? What does that look like? Like, does every school have at least one math fellow? Does every school have a CGI? What does that break down?
Participants, or at least get you that information. Not every school has a fellow, but the idea is for us to start heading in that direction and bringing everybody into the equation. We've had about 135 teachers. So fellows participate in CGI training, which we've had to postpone this year for various reasons that you're aware of. So the fellows participate in CGI and then additional support and training. And then there's also groups of teachers that just participate in CGI. And so we've got about 135 total teachers participating in CGI, and those are spread out pretty well throughout schools. I do believe that there's a school or two, and I don't know off the top of my head which ones, who have yet to have participants, but I know that our principals are anxious to get people moving in that direction. And I'll address kind of how we're going to bring full schools into the equation towards the end of our presentation, but that is really a next step for us as well.
Great, thank you.
This was always the plan. To my understanding, this is a whole new concept, a whole new way of thinking. And instead of having something thrust on the district all at one time where everybody has to do it, whether they know it, want it, like it, or whatever, we have had our expert teachers are most excited about it, learn it well, become the fellows, then become advanced fellows. And then we have the capacity to get more and more teachers excited about seeing the results and what happens. And then eventually we have to get to the point where it's going, yeah, I know you really don't like it, but we're playing this game now. And that's typical of a successful adoption. I've been around long enough to see what happens when you say, here's what you're going to do, whether you like it or not. And oh my gosh, look at what she's doing and look what she's getting as results and look what her kids are accomplishing. I want to do that too. It's so much more effective and it's better for kids. So thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, the early adopters are definitely moving us forward. And like I said, our plan is to bring more in. It's
certainly not exclusive where we say, oh no, only that school gets to do it. Yeah. We want them all.
You're all also getting at a critical or an important point here that not everybody is benefiting from this yet. Only some are, some students and teachers. And you'll notice here in this slide, the varying degrees of connected and coherent learning that we have in our district. School A at this point represents Ray.
Okay.
Where through a research practice partnership with the University of California, Irvine and Orange County Department of Ed, over the last year and a half, we've been able to study how to support student and adult learning in a coherent system. And over the last 3 years, the math fellows that we've talked about, the community has grown to provide a collaborative space for teachers to learn together, focusing on student thinking and standards and responsive teaching. So schools B, C, and D each have one or more teachers participating in Math Fellows. And you see through the lines, you'll notice that the Math Fellows and currently their students are connected and benefiting. But our goal is that all Newport-Mesa students and teachers are to be connected and benefiting from this. And before I turn it on over to some of our teachers, I do want to kind of get back to something Trustee Matoye said. Teacher learning is never done. You don't go and get trained and then you're done. It's a 35-year journey of continuous improvement, and that's what we're shooting for, is that we're continually getting better and learning with each other and from our students. That's a goal here. So to give you insight into all of this and the impact of this learning, this type of learning system and community has had, I want to introduce you to first grade teacher from Adams, Miss Michelle Sperling.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for having me, President Yelsey and Superintendent Lee-Sung, Board of Trustees and guests. I am so excited to share the opportunities and experiences I have had through the opportunities that Newport-Mesa has provided me. Through the years of CGI training, I'm within my 4th year of doing this work. I've been part of Math Fellows as well. I am blown away by the impact that I have seen in my classroom, as well as my impact on teaching and learning. Years before this journey, I continue to be a passionate teacher and doing what's best for my students, but the experience I have had through this professional development, I'm now teaching and learning through a different lens. I was always looking at like learning gaps and thinking of ways to give additional support for my kids, maybe through pull-outs or reteaching lessons. But now instead, I'm not looking outside. I look to myself. I am responsible for my students' learning. And I ask myself, what do I need to do for my students from what I know when I listen to them? And they tell me what they need, and my job is to respond. So I do this through listening, and I listen and I'm focusing on what they know versus what they don't. And using this knowledge that I've gained from my students, I build on what they understand. And it's so great. I get to intentionally plan my next instructional moves in order to guide them to what they need before entering 2nd grade. So now my classroom is full of students who are so passionate about learning. We are a community of learners together, and we are eager to teach each other and also learn from each other. So it's so neat to see that students are now listening purposefully to each other and they can revoice their students, their classmates' thinking and how their classmates are making sense of math. And it's just so enlightening, little 6 and 7-year-old first graders, how they are articulating their math so well at this young age, just to show their mathematical thinking and also defending their answers as proof. It's just through this work, they have like a sense of pride and ownership in their learning. And as for me as a teacher, I get to sit back and enjoy the ride. It's so much fun. So it's, you know, as John was mentioning, I'm at Adams, and I have been lucky enough to have the opportunity to be a part of the Looking at Student Work Protocol group. And we meet Zoom every week. We met today, we meet every Tuesday, and for 30 minutes, and we're pretty good about the time. And this part of the journey has really, I guess, I mean, just during this pandemic time, with the short amount of time that we have with our kids, this, I feel like has just kept the ball rolling. I mean, there were so many, I guess, things I've learned through this professional development, but this being in the heart of what is going on, it just kind of grounds you to what is needed for these students. And I love that we are always focusing on what the students need now and how do we build from them, just and always targeting around the most critical work for first grade. So like I said, these collaborative groups have been an impact in my classroom. That term, 2 heads are better than 1, is a term that's a critical piece in my students' mathematical opportunities. I mean, I have experienced firsthand, without the reliance of my peers, that are also dedicated to this work alongside me, I would have a limited amount of resources. But now that I'm able to be a part of groups like LASW and Math Fellows, we can really kind of work together to see what's best for not only my students, but their students as well. And it's so fun to see. So you have to watch the video that was there, because the protocols that are set in place are around the learning goal that we have for our students. And what we do is we identify what we need. We share our student work. And then this week since the holiday break, we've been working on 2-digit addition math. And the progress from week to week is so amazing. But it's nice to kind of bounce ideas off your peers and know what's right for your students. And it's fun to see that students are so confident in math across the board. You know, I mean, I'm in a school site across the way, and they're also experiencing the same experiences that my students are having. So as I reflect on the experiences and opportunities that I've gained through this professional development, I am really mind blown by the shift in my teaching and learning and how effective I feel in response to what my students need. You know, I was invited to share my experiences as a teacher, but I can't help thinking about what this means for students. I'm a Newport-Mesa parent. I have 2 boys, a 4th grader and a 2nd grader. They go to Davis Magnet School. And the experiences that my students have in my classroom, I want that similar experience for my own children. and for all the children in Newport-Mesa. I know, sorry. I just want you to know that my children also have, I just want to know that my own children also have teachers that know them and look for and leverage their strengths. And I think about how much this has changed my classroom. And I just want others to have that same experience too with this opportunity. So thank you for your time and listening to my experience and my journey. Thank you.
Michelle, before you leave, I was hurriedly writing down, because that last sentence that you said where You want your children to have teachers that look for and leverage their strengths. That means they're looking for what they're strong and using that strength to help them learn more or to build up what they're struggling with. And just that whole concept gave me goosebumps. So
Oh my gosh.
thank you. And I have to finish writing it down before I forget what you said.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Michelle, we are so proud of you and teachers like you. I mean, your passion obviously comes through loud and clear. And one thing when I listen to all this, we're talking about a first grade classroom right here and how they're building confidence, just as you as a teacher are building confidence in what you do, but the kids are building confidence in their ability specifically in math here. And I hope eventually we'll see that go all the way up through the grade levels in the high school, because kids, as we know historically, have said, I'm not good in math. By the time they're in 5th grade or 6th grade or 8th grade, like, I'm only going as far as I have to go in math because I'm not good in math. And it would be nice for us to be able to build up the confidence in our students, not just short term this week or this year, but to build it up so when they get to high school, yeah, I want to continue. I know how to do this. I feel good about it.
Or if they don't, it's not because they don't, it's not because they can't.
But
or they think they can't.
But this is building the confidence,
Yes.
and I think that's what's also so special about this program, long term.
And that is a very good point, because confidence can take you
Oh yeah,
many places, as
Yeah.
you know. So I thank you for highlighting that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I think just to kind of build a little bit on President Yelsey's comment there, this is not exclusive to mathematics. We can position kids, give them opportunity to reason, think, critique each other, critique arguments, cite evidence in language arts, in science, in social studies. So responsive teaching is not exclusive to mathematics. But every teacher should have the opportunities of Michelle, and every Newport-Mesa student should have the opportunities of Michelle's students. And the best way, learning through the RPP at Ray, that we can reach every teacher is through the site leaders. So in the image here, School A, as I've said, represents Ray. And over the past year and a half, Ray has been, as I've said, researched to figure out how to really support this type of learning environment for all of our kids, teachers, and families. And through this partnership, we've experienced firsthand the integral role a principal plays as an instructional leader who learns alongside his teachers in a connected system. So I'd like to ask Dr. Cox to share with you his experience around learning.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. It's an honor to be here. Board President Yelsey, Superintendent Lee Song, all of our trustees, our cabinet, and our guests. Almost 2 years ago, I began a journey of learning with my teachers and district leaders as we focused on responsive teaching in the area of math. For all of those involved in our journey, it required a lot of learning, but learning in a very coordinated and connected manner. Through the support of our district expert, Jody Garino and John Drake, we connected the learning that was occurring at our off-site trainings, the learning that was occurring on our Wednesday array professional development opportunities, the learning through our co-teaching, the learning through our LASWs, which we've been talking about here today. And in the co-teaching, we would humbly get in and practice the strategy. So actually, Mr. Drake and I would go in and we try them along with our teachers. We learned in Math Fellows, we learned in the LASWs, and in all of these places, I was learning alongside of my teachers and engaging in the learning, which was the shift for me. Really, prior to this work, and looking back now, I recognize that I really wasn't equipped, nor was I in the correct mindset to be an instructional leader. My focus as an instructional leader was on things like teacher pacing, ensuring that all the teachers were teaching the same content at the same time, ensuring that certain aspects of an instructional program were being used with fidelity, and among other things, that the adopted program's assessments were being given at the appropriate time. The relationship between the teachers and I was often about following a program, and the teachers being or feeling like they had to be compliant to the district or the principal's expectations associated with a program. I recognize that students at Ray, no matter their current level of achievement at that time, were being taught the curriculum as indicated by a pacing guide. This was certainly not responsive. As I became a learner alongside the teachers, along with the teachers reading research, talking with the students, listening to student strategies, engaging where students are, facilitating grade level LASWs, the teachers and I, or the learning community, began to make decisions together as to what was best for students. It took some time, but teachers, and we know this through the survey data that we received through UCI, began to see me no longer as just evaluative, but really as a learner. There were a number of changes that occurred at Ray, and thankfully, because of our relationship with UCI and the RPP, qualitative data was collected that pointed to these changes. Teachers pursued opportunities for professional growth with their colleagues. Teachers articulated that their vision for teaching and learning changed. Their view of the principal as learner and support in their classroom changed, and many teachers embraced an asset lens in regard to their students and their students' ability to grow and learn in the classroom. An interesting thing that surfaced at Ray, and almost a buzz, kids love math. The responsive approach to teaching math provides students opportunity to explore math, to bring their problem-solving ability, use the creative tools they choose to use, and it's fun. We have even begun discussions among special education teachers about writing goals for IEPs that focus on children's competence and their assets, so that these plans don't continue to focus entirely on a child's deficits. This approach to learning alongside the teachers, learning from children together, the willingness to jump in and try created a very different dynamic for teaching and learning, growing as a professional and really learning what it means to be a lifelong learner. Because of my engagement in learning, I'm better equipped to collaboratively develop a vision for teaching and learning with my teachers. My role shifted from managerial and compliance focused to being an instructional leader. I have a much better idea of the teaching and learning that is happening on my campus and where we all need to grow. It has been a privilege to have this opportunity to build a culture of learning on our campus, and I am convinced this work around responsive teaching will continue to have a positive impact on children, on teachers, and all of our stakeholders. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, Dr. Cox.
Oops, question.
Trustee Anderson.
Oh, I just said thank you, Dr. Cox. I said thank you, Dr. Cox. That was great.
All right, so as you heard from Dwayne and Michelle, what we've learned through our research practice partnership and through our work with fellows over the last 3 years is that all aspects of professional learning need to be connected, meaning what is happening at the district is connected, built upon, and supported at site level in every school. We've also realized that the most regular access, again, that we have to support teachers is through the learning that they do with their instructional leader on their site during Wednesday professional learning time and in their classrooms. This is most impactful when the learning is active, everyone is engaged, focused on an aspect of teaching and learning, and together as a community learning, grounded in the major work as defined by the standards. So what does this look like from a teacher's perspective to be part of a staff, an entire staff where everyone is focused on improving in a coherent system. So Tiffany Kane, fourth grade teacher at Ray, will share her perspective as a teacher in a community where the adults learn together and what this has meant for her students. And the top 10 articles that you're seeing there is the article that I sent over the weekend as well.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tiffany. I teach fourth grade at Ray. Just want to say thank you so much for having me tonight and having me here. Last year, our school really started this journey together of moving towards CGI, our cognitively guided instruction, which was something new to many of our staff members, including myself. So starting something new isn't always easy, but when a whole school is working together, the goal is so much more attainable. And it's also not as scary as opposed to trying something on your own. And from this, I really noticed that our whole team at Ray really shifted into becoming a community of learners where we're really focused on responsive teaching. So every Wednesday, we have our staff meetings, and they have truly turned into a professional development where we are learning from each other, alongside each other, learning from our students, and also our amazing partners who come in, like our math coordinator, Jody Garino, and our math TOSA, Muriel Von Aspen. We get to bring these activities that we talk about in our PDs into our classrooms, and everything that we're learning into our classroom too. And all of these are really putting students in the center. And then we get to come back together and we talk about, what we noticed, how did it go, and what did we learn? And like, for example, right now, we're really focusing on like how important meaningful conversations are among our students. And so a lot of our PD has been focused around that and us making sure that we're allowing our students that time to converse with each other and to engage in each other's thinking. So back in March, when we shifted to distance learning, it wasn't a very easy time for all of us, but all this great work that we started at Ray, we were able to continue through all of our Zoom meetings. And even more so, this really brought us together as learners. And, for example, teachers shared the different ways that they were still able to allow our students to continue sharing their work with each other, to continue sharing their thinking, and also to still engage in their classmates' thinking. So teachers were willing to put in extra hours to teach each other these other technological platforms that they were using and how these things worked for them. And we would also be all willing to ask each other questions. We would text each other, call each other like, hey, could you explain to me again, like how you were able to post an assignment on this platform? So that was huge. And it was just amazing how much we really came together and how great Zoom was. And, all this time, I can strongly say that we're always just wanting what's best for our students. So as you've heard about our LASW, many of us—
What is an LASW?
Oh, so looking at student work protocol.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I couldn't go through a whole nother speed without knowing. Thank you.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the video didn't work, but you would have seen a firsthand example of Jennifer and Nancy at Ray working together with Michelle at Adams. So it's great to see teachers coming together from different schools to engage in this as well. Every week, my fourth grade team and we meet with our principal and our math TOSA, Muriel, and we look at our student work. We discuss what we notice and we set goals for students' learning so that it's really student work that's driving our next moves and our next steps of instruction. So we're really building on what they know, and that's what's guiding us. For example, in one of my recent LASW sessions, we noticed students needed to build their understanding of 1/2. Our standard in fourth grade calls for students to be able to compare two fractions with different numerators, different denominators, and to be able to compare it to a benchmark fraction, such as 1/2. But for them to even be able to compare to 1/2, they have to understand what that means. And that was an area that we saw that we could really build upon. And we've already seen so many great improvements with their understanding. These sessions, they just really allow us to understand our students' thinking. Right now, I could tell you everything about my students right now and their understanding about fractions, just because of all this focus we're putting into being responsive to our students' learning. And, you know, all of this, we're keeping in mind the major work and standards of the grade level. And what's great is, you know, we have this opportunity to really allow student work to drive our next moves rather than worrying about being on a pacing plan and having to move ahead because of the time of year it is right now. You know, we're really able to be responsive to our students, and that's something that I've really improved upon in the last 2 years starting this work together at Ray. And this just has been this LASW has just been a huge resource to us because we're making sense of student work, making sense of what the standard actually means, and most importantly, how we can help our students get to the next step. So every week we're truly seeing so much improvement among the students. Even day to day, I'm seeing improvement in their understanding. We've also done some great co-teaching. Dr. Cox and our math TOSA Muriel Von Aspen, we all co-teach together in my room every week. And this has been a fun and valuable learning experience for all of us. And it's just another example of how we're coming together as learners and also learning from our work. You know, when a principal would come in, I would feel it was for evaluative purposes like Dr. Cox had mentioned, but I don't feel that at all anymore. It's totally shifted to us collaborating and supporting each other. And after a co-teaching session, we'll come together and we'll debrief. And this has been some of the best learning because we're learning from each other, we're reflecting and just talking about everything that we've noticed. I've also been in Math Fellows. This is my second year in Math Fellows. I also began CGI last year. So I've got to be really close with our Math TOSA, Muriel Von Aspen, and she's been an amazing asset to our campus. She is a wonderful resource because she's there for anything that we need, any sort of support or help with understanding. And she facilitates our 4th grade specific Math Fellow sessions. So that's just been another opportunity where teachers from other schools, we're coming together, we're just learning together, and we're just, you know, we just get to share all of our experiences and help each other. So yeah, ever since beginning this journey, my students have been so excited for math, like Dr. Cox said. Last year when we first started, they literally shouted, "Yay, math story problems!" And I had never felt that excitement from my whole class before. And I was sharing with someone the other day, when we were walking out to dismissal, one of my students just walked up to me and she's like, "I just love math so much. I've been taking notes on my Post-it notes. Is that okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course that's okay." So I'm just really seeing this love of learning, and it's just been amazing. So, you know, putting students in the center of learning and being responsive to them has really built their confidence in themselves, and it has really built their understanding and their knowledge. They're listening to each other, they're listening to learn from each other, and all together, just learning together as a staff and having so many resources available to us has been so helpful for our practice, for my practice, and for my students. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, don't leave yet. This is my job, right? Torment the teachers. Can you, and I'm asking this off the top of your head, it's not in your notes and I apologize, but can you give an example of how the confidence that you've built up in math has bled over into language arts, for example?
Well,
since that's all we're teaching.
Yeah,
right now.
I mean, I was thinking about that today. You know, I've been incorporating a lot of what we've been learning in CGI for math specifically, but into my language arts instruction, the questions and building on what students know. So the one example that I really think I'm seeing is that they are talking so much when we're talking about like, oh, like, what do you think the author's point of view is in this story? They get right to talking with each other and listening to each other and pulling evidence from the story. Like, you know, like right here, it said this. So that's why I think that. And they've just gotten to the point where they're really respecting each other and they're listening to learn. And someone will even say, hey, will you show me where you saw that? I kind of want to see where you found that. So it's really, I've noticed this focus in math has really moved to all the subjects that we're doing.
Fabulous. Thank you. You read my mind and did it wonderfully. Thank you so much, Tiffany.
So we're obviously blessed to have this type of talent in our district. And so from the top of this graphic, you can see that some have participated in coordinated professional learning opportunities that have been sustained over time, even during the pandemic. And listening to Michelle, Dwayne, and Tiffany, our goal is to move from some teachers to all administrators, teachers, and students learning together, grounded by guidance documents of the Council of Great City Schools and student achievement partners. You may ask the question, will this work serve us now and in the long term? And the answer is yes. The major work of the grade level, as delineated in the SAP or Student Achievement Partner documents, is the major work that should be the focus of 65 to 85% of instructional time in our classrooms, especially in times like we're in right now. Also, we've said it a couple times as well, the social, emotional, academic development components in the Student Achievement Partner documents also will help deepen our understanding of the link between how we position students in our classrooms to identify and build on their assets is linked directly to their social, emotional well-being. So the plan. Our plan is to move learning forward to support learning, is to move forward by supporting learning for all in connected and coherent ways. District and site leaders will learn together regularly, as you see in the center of this diagram, focusing on critical grade level standards in both math and language arts. Building our collective knowledge around the content and learning intentions of the standards. Site leaders will then engage their staff in collaborative learning experiences in the major work of the standards to support the learning of their teachers and to ensure all students have access and are engaged in the critical work of their grade level. Us learning together to support teachers, students, and families. Learning has the capability, as you've heard, to grow exponentially when the learning of all stakeholders is connected and moving together toward a common vision of teaching and learning. And as you see here, instructional leaders need to be positioned as connected learners, sharing common experiences and opportunities. And with their learning, site leaders as instructional leaders can create and enact learning opportunities for their staff that builds collective knowledge, skills, and resources that ensure all have access to critical grade level content. This may look different from site to site, because like our students, staffs are at different starting points, and our principals, knowing their staff, will respond to this by creating learning experiences that are responsive to their staff needs. With instructional leaders connected and supported through common learning experiences, site instructional leaders will then connect our teachers to coherent site-based professional learning experiences focused on giving all students access to critical grade level content in responsive, student-centered ways. You can see with connected collaboration and learning of leaders and teachers and students, our learning grows, as you heard Michelle say, beyond our walls of our individual classrooms and beyond our own school sites. And finally, we see the interactions between students and parents, parents and parents, parents and teachers, and parents and all of you as consistent and working toward a common goal. This isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to be a lot of work and hard work and learning together. But I think the opportunity offers us, continuous improvement over time. It's working differently that's going to be important. So as stated several times, our focus is to build the capacity of stakeholders so that teachers and students are engaged in the right content in the right ways. And we can be proactive, ensuring that students develop the critical understandings to be successful in future grades if we do this. We started the year, as many of you know, at our advance, our leadership advance with these documents, and it's time to get back into them. As I've mentioned earlier, these resources offer guidance to support unfinished learning and really to support responsive teaching. And just for the record, Student Achievement Partners is an organization that's actually founded by 3 of the original authors of our Common Core state standards.
Wow.
Jason Zimba for math, David Coleman's kind of the, I guess, the godfather of the standards, and Sue Pimentel is author of our language arts standards. So we can rest assured that these priority instructional content guiding documents and language arts and math have been vetted pretty well. So this is an image of a page of the Student Achievement Partners guidance document. And this document provides guidance in both math and language arts around which standards to focus on this year. And in some cases, it even identifies things to emphasize or de-emphasize, as you'll see on here. So let's dive in a little deeper together of this guidance. So notice here, the first grade cluster, 1 number-based 10C. This cluster includes actually 3 standards, and the document guides us to emphasize that in adding 2-digit numbers, a person adds 10s and 10s, 1s and 1s, and sometimes it's necessary to compose a 10 in order to strengthen the progression toward fluency with multi-digit addition and subtraction.
As opposed to carry the 1.
Exactly. It's actually understanding it. So taking a look at an individual standard within this first grade cluster, number-based 10 cluster or domain. At first glance, the standard seems pretty straightforward. Students need to add to 100. However, this is one of the most important and misunderstood standards in first grade. And that misunderstanding has potential future harmful implications if we don't really get in and understand what this standard's asking for. So I did some highlighting for you.
Mr. Drake, Ashley has a question that she's been holding on for.
I can wait till you're done with this section. I don't want to interrupt you in the middle of discussing the standards. Thank you.
So you'll notice not only do students have to add within 100, they have to do so by using strategies based on place value and properties of operations and or the relationship between addition and subtraction. They also need to relate the strategy to a written method and explain the reasoning used. Don't forget, this is first grade.
Yeah, right.
We then see, as we saw in the document, they need to understand that in adding 2-digit numbers, 1 adds 10s and 10s, 1s and 1s, and sometimes it's necessary to compose that 10. For students to compose a 10, we would see them work regularly with numbers like 29 plus 24 in first grade. And those were the numbers that were used in the first grade video of teachers collaborating that we weren't able to access. What's often misunderstood is that the standard doesn't explicitly say add a 2-digit number to a 2-digit number. And by listing some variations in the standard, this main variation of double-digit numbers being added gets overlooked. And I've heard Jason Zimba, the author, talk about this many times. And he says if he could have one do-over, it would probably be in this standard. And he would make it explicit that providing some examples in the standards doesn't mean excluding all others. And unless we're digging in and understanding these standards deeply, we potentially misunderstand them. And so imagine if students left first grade without lots of experiences, basically daily experiences adding 2-digit numbers to 100, how would they meet the standard of being fluent adding and subtracting to 100 in second grade? And then building on this understanding to add to 1,000 in second grade. Or be able to use place value and properties of operations as they multiply 6 groups of 7 in third grade and have to combine all those 7s. There's a story behind our standards that build on itself. This may be the most important standard in first grade, and our job is to make sure all our students have access to meeting future math expectations by making sure that a majority of our instructional time at each grade level is spent on the major focus of that grade level. My plan was to then show you some second grade Mariner students. So I'll send you the video. One of the things I was going to also ask you to do, but we'll rush ahead, is to mentally add 67 plus 25. And then tell me how you did it. And then we would listen to these students do the same thing. And it's pretty incredible. You know, what they do is they demonstrate their fluency. And fluency doesn't mean, as Trustee Matoye talked about earlier, that they've memorized flashcards. It actually means that they're accurate. It's important to be accurate. They're efficient. They can do it, you know, pretty quickly, but not necessarily like that. And probably most important is that they're flexible. And what you would hear, two different ways that these students solve this problem is through place value, through orders of operations, through decomposing numbers and putting them back together to get to 92. And I'll send you those videos later. Okay. Trustee Anderson, did you want to ask your question?
Sure. The question that I had is a bit previously with the community kind of picture. You know, I was reading on there, it says learning as engagement, socio-cultural learning theory. And so I saw one section called out principals, one called out administrators, and one called out parents, or one called out principals, teachers, and administrators, but there wasn't parents specifically listed on there. So I was just wondering what this looks like for parents, how parents are engaged in this process, how have parents been engaged at Ray specifically, because we heard from teachers at Ray, and Dr. Cox, how are the parents a part of this connected learning system? Because I feel like particularly during this time, parents are key.
Through students, and so forth on the graphic. But Dr. Cox has done some really good work around this as well.
This is odd, huh? Hi, Trustee Anderson. You're not
out there in the ether.
Yes. Thank you for that question. So really, you figure we've been in CGI, this is our second year. Really, this year, we didn't get the training that we should have received in the second year, which is at least 6 days of offsite training because of COVID. So we're in our first year. All this research, Mr. Drake said about CGI, this 35 years of research, says that a teacher really doesn't become a CGI teacher until 4 years of really implementing it. So we're at the beginning stages. But something that I've learned through it is that not only do you teach teachers philosophy and give them the tools to begin to think about the assets of children and surface those assets, but you can also give them concrete tools. So for example, counting collections is a concrete tool that we did throughout our entire school. And then we invited all of our parents to come in and do counting collections with us. And what counting collections does really, it hits so many of the standards, really the K-5 standards, because cardinality, once you're doing counting collections, you can add and subtract things. You can count like the standard that Mr. Drake just showed. You could certainly do that with counting collections. So what are counting collections? They're those things that are in everyone's home. They're the beans, the buttons, the whatever little thing you have in your house, you put it together and you give your child an opportunity to play with it and count it and take it apart. It's a thing you could do at a grocery store and while you're sitting in the family room, turn the TV off. So we've had these nights where we've brought parents in with all the teachers and we've just got a bunch of stuff. And we do counting collections. And parents realize it's not about language, it's not about Spanish or English. It's just about engaging your child in learning and the very thing that they know. So that would be a really good example of taking a tool and giving parents insight into how you can team up with us at a school. And there's so many other examples, but that's just one really good example. And that's the kind of thing that we want to continue to do with our parents.
You don't expect parents to be the teachers. The teachers are doing the teaching. You're giving parents tools to support the learning that's going on in the classroom, not tools to reteach it or tools to fill in the gaps. It's tools to support it that are like spy tools, so that the kids don't think that what they're doing at home is more work. It's fun. Let's do this. This looked fun.
Yeah.
And we'll do that. And it gives the kids more confidence and more comfort with what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, got it. Okay.
Mr. Cox.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Mr. Drake, is there anything else?
Over here, I have a question.
Yes.
Were you successful in engaging the parents to come to campus? Did you have success with that? Because that's really key in engaging the parents.
Yeah, well, at Ray, we have this culture, these AVID nights. So that counting collection night or AVID math night was last year. So we have right around 100 adults that will come to our evenings.
Fabulous.
We've had our virtual AVID nights, and we've had attendance that's almost just as good. So it's amazing. We've built a culture certainly where parents recognize the value of coming to these evenings and learning with us, really.
Cool.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Oops, did you get it, Ashley?
Yes, thank you. I don't know if you can hear me. I said thank you. Yes, that was great.
So recognizing the capacity of our principals and teachers, as well as what it will take to support our plan, we will go slow to go fast. This doesn't, like I said, happen overnight. With a focus on all, we will attend to understanding and building a vision for responsive teaching and learning that gets at all students meeting the expectations of our standards. Alongside principals and teachers, our learning together will build our capacity, knowledge, and tools around critical grade level content with a focus on improvement and with intention that will support our instructional leaders to support connected learning systems at their sites. So moving forward, we'll continue what we have started with our fellows and our RPP. Our intent in the fall, everything willing, is to pick back up our cognitive guided instruction training that has been postponed this year. And potentially, to Trustee Anderson's earlier question, if we can find 2 new entire school staffs willing to participate, we would bring on, I'm going to say, another 2 schools like that school A that you saw in the graphics. And our goal is to continue that progress moving forward. The work will be grounded in responsive teaching through the context of CGI. However, the beliefs, as we've talked about, the skills and dispositions of teaching responsively are not exclusive to math and transition and translate into other content area. So as you kind of gather from our last, I guess maybe it's more than 40 minutes or so together, we've been talking for the long term and for improvement over long periods of time. And it'll take some considerable time and effort, as I've said. It's not a quick fix, as there really is no such thing in education. What we're talking about improving our teaching and learning is critical as we move forward. However, we can take some immediate steps to plan for some additional supports for our students right now. So what will happen this spring is regular principal meetings will be guided by these 3 questions. What does it mean to learn, and what kind of learning is called for by the standards? What are kids supposed to be learning? And what evidence do we have of learning? Somewhat like you've experienced today in some of the interactions we've had, we'll be doing lots of reading, watching videos that will work, looking at student work from students in Newport-Mesa and making sense of it together. And through this work, we'll co-develop knowledge and tools for principals to take back to school sites to create and support learning opportunities for their staffs.
May I ask
And in addition,
Trustee Anderson had a question.
How will the district be supporting school sites that may not have a fellow but want to participate next year?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last.
How, if schools do not currently have a math fellow but want to participate next year, how will that happen? What does that look like?
So we do have to think about our capacity. So one of the things that we're looking at is, or as part of this plan, is that the professional learning at sites will be connected to what we're doing up here. You know, CGI, our capacity for CGI is, we've already got about, I'm going to say 6 or 7 cohorts going that we'll need to continue, and to bring 2 more on really will be where we're at. But we will support the learning of responsive teaching and the understanding of math concepts and standards through support of our principals, and then working with their sites until we can get to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question. Do we have any plans for how we're going to implement additional professional development at sites? I know we're not doing standard assessments for math, but I think there's often a direct correlation between high absentee rates and student achievement. Would it make sense to prioritize schools that have had a lot of high absentee rates and ones that we support through the end of the year with additional professional development? Because we're not going to get this data till it's too late, I'm afraid, but we know that if a student is not there, they're not learning as much. Is that something that we've thought about? Or
as far as providing support, providing professional development, we definitely have, you know, we lean towards our, I'm going to say our marginalized, our Title I schools, and making sure that we're looking at things on an, you know, from a lens of equity, and making sure that they're getting what they need to achieve. But of course, if there's needs anywhere, we're going to do our best to reach out and provide that.
Yeah, because I obviously we can't hit everybody at once. You know, we have to go slow to go fast, but we also have to prioritize. It seems though that we can take a look at, the only data we really have is absentee rates, and if we can look at that and maybe give them extra support through the end of the year, just something I was thinking of as I'm looking through this, because it's so amazing, all this wonderful stuff we're doing. I just want to get to them a little bit sooner, and the only data we have is who's not there.
Definitely, we can look at that. So kind of in wrap up, in addition to the work we'll do to provide all students with access to grade level content during the instructional day, we'll also be offering some additional support. Opportunities like the ones that you see on the slide. So Project Kids Connect. Kathleen Leary is ready to basically press launch for our Title I schools.
Yay.
Project Kids Connect is an after-school support for our kids. And so this will be additional after-school support. Obviously, initially, it's going to be done virtually, where kids are connecting at different times with the instructional support virtually to engage in homework help, reading fluency, and any site-specific needs that our Title I schools might have in working with their Project Kids Connect staff that they want their kids to be working on.
And how will parents know to sign up, and all of the logistics that go along with the program will be clearly shared with, okay.
You have, yes, you have met Kathleen Leary. She's pretty thorough.
She's great at logistics.
And does a great job at communicating all that out. I don't have the nitty gritty detail of how. I believe there's flyers and
that's why she gets paid the big bucks. I'm sure she'll handle it fine.
Is there
4 days a week? And I haven't checked with her, but the idea was by either midweek this week or beginning of next week, she'll have 2 sites up and running, Adams and Pomona. And that really is to kind of work the kinks out initially of you know, doing this virtually with staff. And then she'll expand to the other Title I sites. Summer programs we are thinking through.
And Trustee Anderson had a question.
Hi. I don't know why it does that. One of my Project Kids Connect is great. I'm wondering if there's a possibility for additional support during that time, particularly since we're not able to bring outside people on campus, and that this will start out virtually initially, because in the past, you know, there were like Adams, for example, had, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, had 60 kids who were in where it used to be called Project Success. They were 60 kids K to 6th grade, and they were with 2 college students that could not work one-on-one, couldn't work small group. And so I think it is great in theory in some ways, but I'm wondering if particularly with some of the additional federal funding, if we can make sure that there are more support staff that are available, and or if there can be, like, it's just such a powerful time to be able to bring in virtual tutors. So I was just wondering if we could hear a little bit more about the staffing, and what if it's going to look a little bit different during pandemic times rather than, you know, besides it being virtual and not on campus, because I just think it's a great opportunity, but I want to make sure that we use it to its full capacity.
Okay, so at this point, Project Kids Connect staffing, and if I get this wrong, Ms. Leary, please step in, but is with the current staffing that we've held to support currently. So I believe it's instructional aides, and then there's a TOSA who also supports. But Kathleen, as far as additional staffing, I don't believe we've gone in that direction yet, but we can consider that possibly.
She's up.
She's shaking her head, yes.
Yes. Okay. So it's right now, Trustee Anderson, it's the Project Kids Connect staff that we've already got in the system, but we can look at other supports as well.
And
since we have Mrs. Leary, yeah, can we have her? Yeah.
Hi, it's Kathleen Leary.
Are you able to pivot to in-person on-site?
Part of the equation for Ms. Leary is to, look at those opportunities when the time is right, be ready to pivot and move to in-person when that time comes. The difficult part is, if the guidance still requires maintaining cohorts and all of those pieces, that's where the difficulty comes in. But if there's an opportunity, I know she'll be ready.
Just 1 second, because I know Trustee Anderson has another comment. For anyone on Zoom who's speaking though, once you're called on, wait about 3 seconds because there's a delay in connect and going back and forth. So that's why we get the echo, just for your information. Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. Yeah, I waited and it still did it. I'm just wondering, particularly if we're planning for right now for virtual, to be able to best meet, that's going to be really hard, right? If there's like one college aged person who is doing intervention work with a range of kids from 6K to 6th grade, I just practically speaking, I would love to hear more details. It doesn't have to be today, but I just would love to hear more details about how that practically will look on campus, and in the thought of opening it up to on-campus locations because of cohorts, because of all of that, we would need more staff. So I just would love to hear at some point kind of more of the process. Thank you.
We can do that for you. Is there another question?
Well, I just want a clarification just because it's something that is of interest to me on these additional opportunities that you had. Sites will be empowered to extend the day for students when safe to do so. Does that mean you're looking at individual sites that when they are ready to do so, or are we saying when?
No, I'm not looking at individual sites. Okay. I'm looking at, empowering principals to start thinking about if the time comes for us to safely, open up, that there are some opportunities for kids at different sites based off of what the site needs are.
Okay.
And then summer programs also works into the equation. And this is a little tricky. People are tired. And students are tired. And so figuring out exactly what is going to be needed at those programs. Ideally, the focus would be to both build the capacity of our teachers around some of this responsive teaching and digging into standards with some professional development in some time, and then enacting that learning with students in place for a 2 to 3 week period of time. Right now we're saying math and language arts but really we're going to have to kind of get out and find out from the public what those needs are, as well as targeting, some of the needs academically of students. If we are able to focus, say, on math and language arts, the theory or the idea would be to focus on that major content of the previous grade level to set them up, really to have a solid foundation of the intended learning of the previous grade level for the next one.
Are we talking at all about bringing back the summer engineering or the music? Because those maybe could be a way to hit some of those reading and math standards at the same time, but for students who are more interested in the engineering or the music, I know we've tried so hard, and I just feel like those things have kind of fallen by the wayside this year by necessity. So maybe that's a way to get a student who is falling, needs extra assistance, but come at it from a different angle. I don't know if that's even planned, because
those are all in the conversation
okay,
at this point,
great.
And
That
it
is
might be,
that's the model for
it
summer
might be different
science.
flavors, right? It might be a couple of different flavors, depending on really where we're at, what the staffing is going to be. Are there going to be teachers who are interested?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's pretty tired.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions with it. So there's nothing that's out of the conversation at this point.
Yeah.
Trustee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go.
Yes. I had a question on just going back to that summer school slide. So when is the time frame for when we'll know if there is, for instance, capacity to offer summer programming at, say, all of our Title I schools?
Really start making those determinations probably within the next 5 to 6 weeks.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Plan for all of those pieces. So it's going to be a whirlwind for sure. Okay. So that pretty much wraps up, the conversation for me at this point. And moving forward, I think we've got tremendous opportunity to continue our focus. And I'm excited about the board's focus on student learning. It's the right focus. And our continued work learning together will only grow exponentially around a shared vision of responsive teaching and in a coherent system that connects district, site, right down to the desktop.
And Trustee Anderson had a
yeah, I just had a follow-up question about the kind of procedure and strategy. Will we be doing internally like a survey for teachers to ask them if they would be willing or interested to do summer school? And then will we do something for parent? Like what do you anticipate that looking like? Because I know a majority of the parents that I've spoken to for Area 7 want, if they could have full day summer school with enrichment built in, they would. So I was just wondering what that process looks like currently.
Honestly, we have not ironed all the details out. It would include, deciding what the program is going to look like first, and then probably going out with potentially an interest survey of who would be interested, and then going through a hiring process for that. Part of the trickiness of the equation as well is not knowing if we're going to be able to be in person yet. I mean, we're all hopeful. It's heading in that direction, all of those pieces. But there's just a lot of unanswered questions with it. But yes, we do plan on, going through, a process of identifying interest. We have no doubt that families will be interested. That's not a doubt. It's just whether or not we can actually support the wants and desires of all our families.
Okay. I would like to just make one comment. This afternoon, while we went long, which is just sort of a habit of ours, it's so wonderful to talk about student learning and have teachers here that are talking about student learning. And for me not to have to hear the words PPE or vaccinations or testing or it brings us a sense of normalcy and hope, because it's not that I didn't think it would happen. I'm an optimistic person, but it's like a rock out of my backpack knowing that our teachers are teaching to the standards, not as makeup teaching. They're trying to cram in as much as they can in the 2.5 hours that they have, knowing that there are more lessons that they have created to be asynchronous. They don't leave it all just up to the specialists. And I don't know how you can share with your colleagues how proud we are of you and how important it is to our students and parents' children that you're going those extra miles for our kids. Thank you so much. And Dr. Cox, you need to now be a contagious person and get some of your administrative learning into every principal. No challenge.
To add to Trustee Metoyer, I mean, sitting here and watching you live in person, I could feel your energy and your positive energy. So thank you so much for also extending your day and coming here and spending a few more hours to share about your successes. And it shows your dedication, your fervor, your passion. And you are the bright light in a student's day, truly, because they go home and who knows what home looks like. And so for you really are, I could feel your energy. And I also loved hearing the collaboration between your teachers, your grade levels. I loved hearing the professional development happening in our district despite and in spite everything we hear. So thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just want to echo what everybody has said, and I'm sure what everybody else is feeling. Thank you, Mr. Drake, Mr. Cox, Michelle, Tiffany. We really appreciate you being here, and really your energy and your emotion really comes through, and it's apparent. So we're proud of you. We do have a lot of work to do. We want to expand this to everyone in the district. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it all. Okay, we are not done.
Are we?
Oh, Trustee Anderson had a question.
And
I'm sorry.
A comment that I have to read before we go to close.
Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, I had a few additional questions. I have a whiteboard of questions. I don't know if I didn't realize we were closing. I wanted to know some things, particularly about learning loss, about when are we planning on opening our school libraries? Like some of those specific questions about MTSS and how that holistically we are planning on with the committee that's meeting, what they're seeing and thinking for the spring. So I have some additional questions. We don't have to talk about them right now, but I would just like to know, like really specifically for families that ask me some of these things, like why isn't my library open? Those are just some of the questions that I would love. So if there's time for just to talk about the libraries for a moment, or additional facilitators, or any of those additional things that directly impact learning loss. I apologize, it's hard with my raise hand button not working.
Any questions? So much I think we all want to continue talking about. Trustee Anderson, we'll try to get information to the entire board on the libraries and share that with the public at a later time. MTSS is a huge topic that we definitely will be bringing forth, probably in its own standalone study session. Okay, so we'll be planning that as well. But I know we all have more things we want to discuss. And like I said at the beginning, this is just the first. And I will echo what Trustee Matoye said. It's so great to spend this time on instruction. And I didn't hear the word vaccine. I didn't hear COVID testing. I didn't hear social distancing.
It was so wonderful.
Okay. And so we will continue this. I also want to state that, we're end of January right now, and we've been talking at executive cabinet and conversations starting with principals, is that this is the time we have to start planning for a very well thought through and structured summer program. We got to utilize that time. And it's still too early to get into all the details of that, but there's going to be some big decisions that we're going to have to make. We're going to have to do this wisely and make sure we utilize the time and get the support to the kids during this very important time. But I want to make a couple of comments, and this is starting with the math question. What is 1 + 1? When you're talking about what we are hearing, 1 + 1 is not equal 2. It actually equals more. And what we're seeing is the synergy that's going on amongst our staff and building this culture at Ray, at other schools with the fellows that we really want to promote and build throughout the district. Because 1 + 1 + 1 doesn't equal 3. You see the combined efforts and the work that they're doing together, it equals a whole lot more. And that's what's so exciting about it. The other thing that I think this resonates with me, it resonates with all of us, is the humanistic approach of instruction and how it can be. And that's what's so powerful with this. And when this is done, and our teachers do this, and I know that they're there, and we're going to foster that, we're going to enhance that, that they're building kids up. They're building kids up in subjects that traditionally have been very difficult for kids. And to hear the stories over and over again about how kids at this young age love math, and it's fun. We heard the word fun many, many times.
Yes.
We didn't hear COVID, we heard fun, right? And that's what learning should be. And that's going to carry over. So we're building kids up. And then the other thing, I just want to put this word out and this thought, because this is going to be a very critical time. You're going to be hearing about a lot of funding. You're going to be hearing about a lot of initiatives and a lot of ideas. The thing we have to be very careful about is not trying to do everything and doing it poorly and haphazardly and chaotically. So those who have been in education a while, we've seen when all of a sudden there's these laws, these mandates, these initiatives, oh, this grant, this funding. And guess what happens in that environment? Nothing is done well. And we lose our focus on what's the most important thing. And that's what happens between a teacher and a student in a classroom during core instructional time. So even though we're thinking about, extended day, extended year, things, it still comes down to what you heard Mr. Drake and our teachers and our principals talk about, is what are we doing with students at the core, the foundation levels. That's what's important. When you hear MTSS, you're going to hear Tier 1. You're going to hear first best instruction. You're going to hear what we're doing for all kids, which really needs to be where we put our focus on first. So, what you're hearing is really important. It wasn't all the details in terms of what is summer school going to look like and all that. We will get there. This was the fundamental piece that I think we all needed to hear together, and we're going to build on that. So anyways, there's a lot of work to do. This is the time we're going to start preparing, not only for the summer, the spring, and into the fall, as you heard. And this is exciting, exciting stuff. And I really appreciate Mr. Drake. I appreciate Dwayne, Dr. Cox, Tiffany, Michelle, and please keep up the great work and tell everybody you're working with how much we support that. And I'm going to end with this. What I see in all of you is something I think really, really important to point out. And what you're doing demonstrates a lot of humility, because you've acknowledged that you're learners, okay? And to me, humility comes with self-confidence. So great job. Please spread that. Please continue this great work. Thank you.
Trustee Bartow, before we move on, just had one more question.
I hate to follow that beautiful speech. But it
school sites where the teachers are working with the librarians individually to get books for the students. So the kids aren't actually able to go into the library, but the teacher looks at their reading level and their interest and is hand selecting and doing that above and beyond
It's
extra
like a
level.
bookmobile.
It's really great. So I bet it's going on district-wide, but I just love to know if it is, because I know at least in the 3 or 4 school sites I talked to that those teachers are really going above and beyond in that way.
Okay, we'll get back.
I continue to hear that it's a need. So I would
Trustee
like,
Anderson?
yeah. I continue to hear it's a need. So particularly for learning loss, I think it's really important as soon as possible. If we can get some clear guidance, I know some of the librarians are waiting for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, everyone. We will adjourn into closed session, but before we do that, we have one public comment on 8A, and I believe
it's me.
Trustee Metoyer, would you like to read that?
This comment is from Wendy Lease. She says, good afternoon. Not knowing the employee to be discussed in closed session, I wish to make a general statement regarding the employee charged with facilitating the public's access through the internet to give comments in your open school board meetings. Last week, I attended and gave comments on Zoom at a meeting of a subcommittee of the Orange County Fair Board. Last night, I was able to give my public comments to the Costa Mesa Planning Commission through a real-time webinar. I raised my hand, I was unmuted, and I spoke for my 3 minutes. That is my First Amendment right. It is time for Newport-Mesa to join the real world and offer the public the opportunity to express our concerns, make our comments, and for you to hear our voices. Whichever staff member has failed to bring you this opportunity needs to be put on notice that their job is at risk. In the real world, that person would have lost their job a long time ago. This is not the first time the public has asked for this just to be ignored since March.
Thank you. We will now move into closed session. The item is 8A, Public Employee Discipline, Dismissal, Release, Employment. After closed session, we will return to this public session in about 30 minutes with a brief readout. Thank you. In closed session, the Board of Education took action to affirm the findings as presented and declined to reopen the record to hear from all parties. The roll call vote was as follows. Ayes 7, noes 0. Thank you very much. Good night.
Adjourn the meeting.
The meeting is closed at 6:09 p.m.